Good morning, and can I welcome everyone to the 14th meeting of the Public Petitions Committee in 2020. This meeting is being held virtually. The first item on our agenda today is the consideration of new petitions. The first new petition on our agenda today is Petition 1819, NHS Bursary for Scottish Paramedic Students, lodged by Rachel Taylor. The petition is calling on the Scottish Government to introduce a bursary for paramedic students across Scotland. The committee was due to take evidence from the petitioner. However, owing to unforeseen circumstances, Rachel Taylor is unavailable to join us today. In her place, we'll be taking evidence from our fellow campaigner, Rory McLean. So can I welcome Rory, and thank you very much for joining us. It's appreciated. And can I invite you to provide a brief opening statement on behalf of the petitioner before we move to questions?
Thank you for that, and it's a pleasure to appear in front of the committee virtually this morning. I'm standing in for Rachel. She's unfortunately not able to make it today, so I have a statement to read and then happy to take any questions from you. I think it's important to open with the premise of this campaign, which is what we all believe, that Scotland fundamentally values diversity and developing a safer, stronger and more inclusive society where everyone can live in peace and realise their potential. As a society, we recognise that everyone should be provided with a fair opportunity to reach that potential. Student paramedics in Scotland are, however, faced with a challenge that after completing hundreds of other students to achieve a spot on a highly competitive area of study, a challenge that creates a barrier on students from achieving the goal that they have already worked so hard for. Student paramedics face a barrier of financial restriction. These financial restrictions should not pose a barrier to higher education in Scotland. Ordinarily, students would be able to work part-time during their studies and then work full-time during the summer months. However, student paramedics, like student nurses and midwives, do not have this ability, as we must complete over 2,500 hours of unpaid placement to complete our course. This makes students from the paramedic science background seem unreliable to businesses or employers. And for those who are able to get a job and who do take that route, it means that they are working a huge amount, including their studies, their placement and their job. The Scottish Government created the Nursing and Midwifery Bursary to make nursing a more accessible field to study and to help fill the occupational shortage faced by NHS Scotland, as highlighted by many publicly available reports. Paramedics, though, are also seen on the same occupation shortlist published by the Scottish Government and also on the UK Government's occupational shortlist. Now, whilst paramedic students and nursing studies are similar in their regard, the courses can differ somewhat. But despite the similarities of the courses, the support received is not of parity. For example, an adult learner over the age of 25 who studies nursing or midwifery would receive a minimum of 900% more support than a student paramedic of a similar age based on the basic non-repayable bursary alone. Now, the Scottish Government has brought the Nursing and Midwifery Bursary to a point where it now stands at £10,000 per year of financial support as of the academic term 2020-21. And none of this is repayable. This allows student nurses and midwives to enter their new career path debt-free. We believe that this difference in funding does not reflect the basis of the Scottish Government's faith and beliefs, and that student paramedics should also receive this kind of excellent support in order to avoid being faced with a personal austerity. The similarities in the demanding schedule and a desperate need for the increase in numbers in the workforce is evident for nurses, midwives and paramedics alike. With an already excellent support scheme in place for student nurses and midwives, it now seems obvious that the next logical step for the Scottish Government is to extend this support to student paramedics as well. The ambulance service is severely understaffed, and the in-house training that ambulance technicians could undergo to train as a paramedic is soon to become redundant. Previously, a paramedic was an occupational route. However, the professional standards set by the Health and Care Professions Council, the HCPC, have now changed, requiring all new registering paramedics after the 1st of September 2021 to have a HCPC approved degree from what currently one of 5 Scottish universities. Now, our campaign is already supported by several ambulance service worker unions, including the GMB, Unison and Unite the Union, all of which fully support our campaign. Now, they know better than anyone else how desperately the service needs more staff, because they are the staff of the service. We want to become lifesavers, caregivers, the people you know you can count on in your hour when you need help the most. We are ready and willing to take on the challenges of the work and dedicate our lives to helping others. And what we are asking for is help in achieving this. Now, it's not just the trade unions who are supporting us. We also have support from the College of Paramedics. This is the national professional body that represents all paramedics across all 4 nations of the UK. Their CEO, Tracy Nichols, was one of our earliest supporters. And we're really proud that the professional body also backs our campaign in Scotland for student paramedics to get a bursary. And it doesn't stop there. We also have the backing of the National Union of Students, who recognise the large amount of placement and study that makes work inaccessible for student paramedics. And they're also backing our campaign. And since we've launched, it's been fantastic. We have now got the backing of all but one party in Holyrood. The Scottish Greens are supporting us, the Scottish Liberal Democrats are supporting us, the Scottish Conservatives and Scottish Labour. All 4 of these parties now support the Pay Student Paramedics campaign. So, in backing us, we have the trade unions, the Professional Association of Paramedics, the National Union of Students, and 4 political parties in Scotland. Now, the Scottish Government states that student paramedics already have several aspects of our course paid for, such as tuition fees, occupational health checks. However, this is true, but nurses and midwives also receive this and yet are better supported on top of this than student paramedics. Therefore, creating a student paramedic bursary or matching us into the existing nursing and midwifery bursary would open the doors to so many more caring and committed people who want to become paramedics. Recruitment is difficult, the job is tough, but the call for more paramedics now and for the future is something the Scottish Government should be striving to answer. This is why we're pleading for change. This is why we're asking the Scottish Government to establish a bursary for student paramedics that is equal to that currently received by nursing and midwifery students here in Scotland. And in turn, we believe this would strengthen our NHS for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and it's very much appreciated you being here today, even if it is virtually. Can I just clarify with you before a substantial question to ask, have you got figures on the numbers of students who go through in any particular year?
So we don't have the exact numbers at the moment. The numbers that we've been working on for financial projections are based on current student numbers at the one university in Scotland that does run the course. So at the moment, we are there's 100 students who were training last year, and there'll be 50 students at each university. So the cost of the bursary would be £3.5 million going into this year, then up to 5.5 million, then 7.5 million to reflect the increasing numbers. So there'll be 350 student paramedics training in Scotland this year, 550 the year after that, and then 750 the year after that.
Okay, thank you for that. So in the petition, it's highlighted that nursing, and you did this in your statement as well, that nursing and midwifery students can access a bursary which from this academic year is worth £10,000 in recognition of the fact that they spend up to 50% of their course in placement. Is it your argument, or is the purpose of this petition to seek the same level of bursary for student paramedics, or do you think is there a difference in the level of commitment?
For the purpose of this petition, we would be seeking the same level of commitment from the Scottish Government that is given to nursing and midwifery students. The reason behind that is that we see a clear similarity between the way that their course is structured and the way that our course is structured. We spend the same amount of time on placement, and even in our first year of study, we actually take some of the same modules. So there is a definite crossover here between the courses. So yes, we're asking for the same amount.
And so, do you think then, perhaps, in trying to understand why the Scottish Government hasn't simply moved to recognise that parity, do you think there's a perception from the current funding available that nurses and midwives are valued more highly than paramedics, or that they're going to be that paramedics are more easy to recruit into training?
It's hard to say. I want to recognise that nurses and midwives are incredibly valuable and they deserve the bursary that they get, definitely. And we have a lot of time and we always work with them. I think there is a perception amongst some student paramedics that we don't feel as valued, but I maybe genuinely believe this is an oversight from the Scottish Government, because the route to become a paramedic used to be an occupational training route where you would be paid by the Scottish Ambulance Service as you trained. And now that has only very recently moved to become a professional route through university. I think what's happened here is the Scottish Government has changed the procedure to become a paramedic, and maybe the funding has yet to catch up as well.
Okay, thanks very much. That's very helpful. Can I call Maurice Corey?
Thank you, convener. Good morning, Mr. McLean. Thank you for appearing before us today. One, I appreciate that the Bachelor of Science in Paramedic Science degree course that starts this month. It is clear that the petitioner anticipates significant challenges, both financial and non-financial, ahead for paramedic students. Can you walk us through the degree programme and explain and where you would expect these challenges to lie, particularly in relation to the placement, when you're on placement?
Yes, thank you very much for that question, Maurice. So the programme is 3 years long. Like most programmes in Scotland, it is slightly unusual this year with the COVID pandemic that the first proportion of the year will be online theoretical learning. And now, as we go through the course, student paramedics are expected to become more and more close to independent paramedics. So at the end of our first year, we should be doing 75% of the job of a paramedic under minimal supervision. By the end of our second year, 80% of the job under almost no supervision. And then obviously by the end of the third year, we would be expected to practice at the level of a paramedic. The problem here is that we would be on, at times, placements of 16 up to 20 weeks. Now, during these placements, we will be shadowing paramedics working shifts. Now, these shifts are 12 hours long, and we may be doing them for 3 or 4 days in a row, which would mean during that week we're unable to work. And I think it would be very unreasonable to expect a student paramedic to do a 12-hour shift, go to another job, sleep, and then go back to work. I mean, I wish there were that many hours in the day, but there's not. But I think the problem that we're going to see here is that the struggle comes primarily in the second and third years, and in the later half of the first year of the degree. Because many student paramedics, unlike normal students, don't work over summer. We're unable to work over summer because we're doing these placements. And a high number of the hours that we are on placement are unsociable hours, meaning that we can't gain regular employment. So to answer your question, I think the largest problems we would see are the times when we are on placement. Now, that can sometimes be with the ambulance service, but we also have placements on maternity wards, on mental health wards, in care homes. Paramedics aren't just running around on the streets. We actually have a wide variety of skills that take a long time to learn. So I think that's why we would need this bursary, so that we can fully commit ourselves to it.
Can I come in here, the supplementary convener, please?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So therefore, yeah, I have a daughter who's just gone through an OT degree at Glasgow Cali, so I'm aware that there are certain hours of placement in that. So, and the strains and stresses of trying to earn money in between. So really what you're saying is that you really cannot work in a normal job to earn that money, which a normal student would be able to do in his or her degree course. And this is really impinging on your sort of ability to look after yourselves financially. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's definitely correct. I couldn't put it better myself. And we've recently conducted a report where surveying student paramedics, where many have said this as well, that they feel a financial strain, where they feel unable to work because they have to do these placements. So yeah, we feel constricted by our service, to the Scottish Ambulance Service, from being able to get regular work.
Thank you, Rory. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Gail Ross.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, Rory. Thank you for joining us. That was a really compelling opening argument that you made there. We've had a written submission from the Cabinet Secretary, and she has said to us that the Scottish Government will soon be commencing a review of the education provided to allied health professionals, and that will include paramedics. That review will include the financial support offered to students. So here's your chance to tell the Cabinet Secretary what you would like to see in that review for paramedics.
Thank you, Gail. So we've written to the Cabinet Secretary a couple of times and tried to tell her what we'd like to see. So thanks for presenting me with this opportunity to tell her virtually. What we'd like to see is the recognition of the hard work and the training that we put in to become paramedics. No one takes up this job for the pay. No one takes it up for the hours. No one takes it up because it's easy. We take it up because we care. We want to be there for the Scottish people when they're struggling. We want to be there, pick your granny up off the floor when she's had a fall. We want to be there to hold your hand when you're delivering that baby at home on your own. We want to be there to give you support in those moments that are so heart-wrenching and struggling. That's what we want to do, and all we're asking is for a bursary so that we can focus on that completely, so that we don't have to worry about our finances and where we're going to get money while we're doing that. So what I'd say to Jenna Freeman is that we're not asking for a lot, we're just asking for enough to get by. And £10,000 and then giving equality to ourselves and parity to ourselves with student nurses and midwives is what we're asking. And you know, I really appreciate that the Scottish Government's undertaking a review at the moment, and I think that's fantastic. And I'm so glad to see that they're being proactive about this. But I know that there's student paramedics out there right now who are struggling. I know there's, you know, classmates in the years above us who are having a really tough time. And so I really welcome this review, but it needs to happen now and not in the future. That's what I'd say.
So your main message is don't wait for the review, because we don't know what the timescales of that realistically are going to be, that you want action now.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We want action now, and we need action now to stop student paramedics living on the poverty line.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gail.
Hey, can I call Tom Mason?
Thank you, Convener. Welcome. In her written submission, the Cabinet Secretary states that the nursing and midwifery bursary was maintained on the grounds of workforce planning to ensure that there was a steady flow of people coming into nursing and midwifery. Do you have the same concerns about the workforce planning for paramedic workforces?
Thanks for that, Tom. I think we do have some concerns about this as well. I know there was a report in the Times, I think January 2020, very early this year. Has been a strange year, so forgive me if I can't get the dates right, that showed that there were 42,000 shifts that were unable to be covered, which shows that there is a shortage of paramedics, definitely. And we do worry that without a bursary, we're not going to be able to fill that gap. And it's not only that we're not going to be able to fill that gap, it's that current paramedics themselves are under a huge amount of strain. And one of the reasons we need the bursary is to make sure that student paramedics can complete their training and take some of the pressure off regular paramedics. Now, Unison released a report in May 2019 called An Emergency But No Accident. And I'd just like to read one statement from it that I think is really telling about the workforce flow. And it says, despite a small increase in numbers, 98% of paramedics say their workload was heavier, including 83% who said it was much heavier. It's not just about call numbers, but it's about the nature of those calls. And I think that's one of the big things for us. We need to get a proper bursary scheme in place so that we can get trained paramedics in the numbers that the Scottish Government has asked for into the ambulance service as soon as possible.
Well, following on from that, do you think that the current number of places available on the BSc paramedic science degree courses around the country are sufficient to ensure the steady flow of new recruits into the profession?
That's not something I'd be able to comment on because I don't have a good enough understanding of the workflow programming for the ambulance service. What I would say is that no matter what the numbers, if they're going to be higher, we need a bursary to ensure that we don't get dropouts as well. Because one problem is that if we don't have properly funded students, no matter how many places we have, if they can't complete the course, we're going to encounter workflow problems in that sense. So while I can't comment on the amount of numbers, I would say that having a bursary in place is essential for those numbers reaching matriculation and confirmation by the HCPC to become paramedics.
Can I, Karina, go a further question? You're comparing paramedics with nurses and midwives. How does it sit with the other professions, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and the other paramedic professions?
How does what sit with them? Sorry, Tom.
Well, in terms of the comparison. I mean, at the moment, all the examples you're giving are compared with nurses and midwives. How does it compare with physiotherapists and occupational therapists and the like?
I see. All right. The reason that we make our comparison with nurses and midwives is that they are the people who currently receive the bursary, and they were on an occupational shortlist, which is one of the reasons why the bursary was put in place for them. And paramedics are also on an occupational shortlist. So the reason we make the comparison there is it's what we're looking to achieve. And also the programme structures are the most similar due to the unsociable hours. So that's the reason that we've been making that comparison.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning. Given the challenges that have been outlined to the committee, what impact do you think the introduction of a bursary would have on the students currently taking the BSc Paramedic Science course and on those who may pursue the course in the future?
Thanks for that question, David. I can only say it would have a massively positive impact if this bursary were to be introduced. I think I outlined previously to Gail kind of the emotional reasons why we want to do it, but I think there's also a question of accessibility here as well. Because this used to be an occupational route where you would be paid, it meant it was open to anyone because you wouldn't have to worry about how you were gonna, pay for your kids, if you had caring responsibilities. And I think the problem now is that without any proper funding in place, we very much limit the type of people that can become paramedics. And for paramedics to be successful, because we interact with people from all walks of life, we need people from all walks of life to become paramedics. And so this bursary is important in terms of accessibility. So people who are having a later in life career change can do it. People with children can do it. People with care responsibilities can do it. So not only would it make it easier for those currently doing the course, it would make it more accessible for anyone who wants to do the course as well. And it would obviously relieve the financial burdens and the emotional pressures that student paramedics have if this were introduced.
Okay, thank you. Can I maybe just ask a couple of final questions, but if members want to come in, I will allow them back in. Can I get a sense of, do you have figures on the dropout rate? So if this is an issue, do you have any sense that people are actually having to decide to drop out because of the costs and pressures on students?
I don't have any figures on that. I can try and get some and come back to the committee with figures on that, if that would be helpful, Convener.
That would be not to create any huge amounts of work for you. The other thing is, have I got a sense from you that is the average age of a student older? Are they more likely to have already been working in this field and going in to do a degree, so that in a sense the pressures on them are different from somebody who's 18, 19 years of age, perhaps still supported by their families? Do you have a sense of the kind of group of people who are here in this job degree?
Yeah, so I think that would definitely be accurate to say that as well. From the people that I've interacted with across, who are coming into university across the 5 universities in Scotland, it is me myself, I've done a degree before, and my cohort when I did my first degree was very young. It was very homogenous in that sense. But I know of people on the course at the moment who are, parents with 2 kids, people who are in their 40s, their 50s, people that have served in our armed forces as medics and are now training to become paramedics. I know there's nurses in our NHS who are changing over profession. So I would say that this course, unlike many, does have a very diverse age range as well. We have people coming out of college, and we have people who, are really changing their career later in life. But a large proportion of it, I would say, is definitely at least over 25 and not supported by their parents, and what we would class as independent students. Okay.
I suppose 2 last points. Do you think there is an argument for saying the old system was better, that you were, because of your points you make about accessibility, that actually insisting on somebody doing a degree with all the costs, making that decision, is a less fruitful way of training people than bringing them in and training them up and seeing people with capacity to go that wee bit further as a paramedic?
It would be hard for me to say an answer to that, because I'm only just beginning this journey. I think the HCPC, the Healthcare and Professions Council, have obviously made that decision for a reason, and I think it would be foolish of me to try and double think people that are very experienced in making these decisions. But it does seem to me like the changeover has happened from a occupational route to a university-based route without necessarily the funding to follow that as well. That is what I would say in that respect.
So even if it was the right route to go, there's not been transition planning?
Yes, it feels like perhaps there hasn't been transition planning in terms of funding that's going to happen. And also the cost for this is very, very small. We've worked it out to 0.04% of the current health budget would be needed to fund this in the 3rd year of when we've got the maximum amount of paramedics training in Scotland. So it's not an expensive transition as well, and I think that's important to note.
Okay, so that figure is quite important, perhaps, in conversations we're going to have with the Scottish Government, because clearly people are going to say, well, where's the money going to come from? You've identified it's a small part of the budget. Have you identified benefits to the system from funding it this way? In terms of, you're doing a cost-benefit analysis, what are the benefits of doing it this way in terms of securing planning in the future for paramedics?
That's something that we haven't planned out yet, and we were hoping to plan out in our conversations with the Scottish Government as well. But in terms of the cost-benefit analysis that we can see immediately is that by having a properly funded paramedic course and having more paramedics graduate, we then have less shifts that are being covered, higher response times. But I also think there's a human factor in this that we can't put into a cost analysis, and that is the stress that will be taken off current paramedics and the delivery of a better service to our users. Because I don't think you can put a cost on a paramedic getting there 10 minutes earlier and perhaps, that life-saving difference.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I'm just going to, obviously, that is immensely helpful, and I again appreciate very much you standing in for the petitioner. I wonder if we can maybe take some views from the committee. I'll call Maurice Gray first of all, on the basis that he's put in a request to speak.
Thank you, convener. Yes, very interesting your comment, Rory, about the sort of age range of the students on the courses, and also the the questions put by the convener just now on that very subject. And I know you're going to come back with some data, which will be very interesting indeed. From your experience, can I take it as read that this is considered more a mature student's course rather than an undergrad's course? Degree course?
Yes. So my experience is slightly more limited than the petitioners, that I'm only going into my first year. But from the interactions that we've had with this campaign and the people involved in it, it definitely is a mature course, I would say as well. Whilst there are younger people on the course, I would definitely say this is a course for people with who are coming to it a little bit later, because being a paramedic, I think, does require that life experience, and the applications of these courses are very high. I'm studying at Glasgow Caledonian University, and only 4% of people that apply are accepted onto the course. So I think that comes out also at the application and interview stage as well, in that sense.
Thank you for that, Rory. I think it's very interesting indeed, because I think that shows another light on what the Scottish government's got to consider in their review, and I think it's something you should push hard on from the point of view of ensuring that that message gets across, Rory.
Thank you, Maurice.
Thank you.
I'm just going to run around the committee so that people have particular observations on what we should be doing with this. I mean, I find the arguments very compelling. The cost doesn't seem huge amounts. It does feel a bit like it's just not been thought of rather than actively being resisted, although I think the Cabinet Secretary's views are still quite robust. And it feels to me, if there is the question we might want to be asking the Scottish Government, is there workforce planning issues for paramedics? And if so, why is there not parity in it? People making that transition from one job to another when they're slightly older, I think do need to be supported if we're going to get them in. So anyway, that's my view. I think we should be writing to the Scottish Government emphasising the urgency involved, and I'm interested in other people's views. Can I call David Torrance?
Thank you, Convener. I would agree with you there. I think we should write to the Cabinet Secretary just to see what the timescale is on this and how long it's going to take, because as you know, any review could take up to 2-3 months to 2 or 3 years, and this is something I feel it needs to be sorted soon, for the sake of the students that's there and for the sake of students going through and keeping that throughput there. So I'd quite happily like to write to the Cabinet Secretary to have our views on it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Tom Mason?
Convener, I would agree with that. It's very clear there's a gap here which could be oversight, but it needs to be addressed. But only the government could do that. So we need to write to them, insist they get on with the job and sort this particular problem out now, even if there's a bigger overall review later on.
Yeah, thank you. And Gail Ross?
Yes, thanks, Convener, and thanks again to Rory. As I said, very compelling arguments, and I think that he said at the start about all the support that the campaign has got, and I would maybe just like to point out that because an overall political party hasn't come out to support it, it doesn't mean to say there are not individual supporters within that party. I think that we definitely need to follow this up. I think David Torrance is absolutely right. And Rory also said it as well in his evidence that a review could take a while, and this is something that I think needs addressed immediately. I was interested to note that the change from learning on the job, where the trainees actually got paid, to now being a university course and actually being students. And I think that you're right in saying that it's maybe just something that's fallen through the cracks, but I think even so it's something that needs addressed. So I would back that course of action, Convener, in writing back again to the Scottish Government. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, and I do think we appreciate that there are different pressures on government party members than others. I mean, and some of us have been there before, but you're quite right to highlight that this doesn't necessarily mean that that there isn't a great deal of recognition, I think, of the questions or the challenges that were put down to us by the petitioners. So we are agreeing to write to the Cabinet Secretary, really saying how compelling the argument is, concerns that perhaps the remit and timescale of review is going to be too slow, that perhaps it's just simply where the transfer was made, the transition was made, the planning behind that wasn't made. The fact that the group who are coming into this degree may be older with family commitments in a way in which young people wouldn't. And of course, we would hope that they would engage directly with the petitioner and with Rory and his colleagues. The Cabinet Secretary would want to flag that up. And I am also interested in asking, do they accept that there are workforce planning arguments in favour of this as well, that it's not oversubscribed, that there are pressures, and we've got the papers, and you referred to it, Rory, round the pressures that are on paramedics currently. So we'd be interested to know whether they've factored that in as well. Any last points that anybody want to make? No, I think in that case we are agreed on that action. Can I thank Rory very much for coming along? I think he made an excellent case, and we obviously will be considering the evidence we've heard and the response from the Cabinet Secretary at a later stage. But thank you very much for your attendance, and I'm going to suspend briefly, shall we say, till 10:10.
Thank you.
So 10:10.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's been a pleasure to appear before the committee today, and thank you all for your questions that were in such good faith, and I really hope that we can work and get this sorted out for student paramedics in Scotland.
Thank you very much for that, and I'll suspend the meeting till 10:10. Can I welcome you back, and we now move to the next new petition for consideration today, which is petition 1805 on the provision of NHS hospitals in Scotland, lodged by Gillian Mackay. The petition calls on the Scottish Government to increase the number of hospitals in Scotland, particularly in towns with no hospital or out-of-hours provision or transport links to access such services. We have received a submission from the Scottish Government as well as a response from the petitioner. The Scottish Government notes the location and nature of healthcare facilities is a matter for each territorial health board to consider for its own area, taking into account the needs of its population, the geography of its area, and NHS Scotland's clinical strategy. It also notes it does not believe that towns with a certain number of residents should automatically qualify for a hospital, but the system based on an assessment of need should remain. In the written submission, the petitioner states that while government strategy may well have been to reduce the need for secondary care through measures to prevent ill health and support early intervention, such changes take generations to implement if they are at all successful, and in the meantime, secondary care is imperative, especially in light of the recent pandemic. I think this is an interesting petition because I'm not sure if, in my view, the solution is not really one that I would agree with, but I do recognise that this is clearly about a very specific decision about a particular hospital. The petitioner talks in some detail about the impact of the relocation of, I think it's the Monklands Hospital for Cumbernauld. So there's no doubt that this is a highly contentious issue at a local level, and these issues about where we put services, where hospitals are located, are very, very sensitive, and all of us, I think, will have had experience of that in our own work. And my sense here is that I don't think that the solution to this is to say that there should be a hospital in every town, but that's not to disrespect what's clearly a strongly held view about the need for a hospital in our own locality. So my own feeling is that, that as a committee, there's not much we can do further with this petition, but I would want to underline that I recognise that there are very strong local campaigns, as there will always be, around the location of hospitals. And I'm just going to ask members for any comments and suggestions for action. Can I call Gail Ross first?
Thanks, Convener. Yes, I totally agree. And I know from my local area that certainly citing of health centres and establishments is an extremely emotive issue, and I completely understand where the petitioner is coming from. But I agree with you that I don't think that the solution that is called for would be good Scotland-wide. I mean, I know that in different places you have different sizes of hospitals. You might have a minor injuries unit in one place, you might have a health hub in another, and a central hospital then that they all feed into. The health boards do take these decisions based on local need. And I don't believe that from the submissions that we've had in that the Scottish Government are going to change that model at all. So I have every sympathy with the petitioner, absolutely. But I don't think that it's anything that we can take forward in any meaningful way, unfortunately. So I would move to close the petition under 15.7 of Standing Orders. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Can I call Maurice Corrie?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I agree with both my colleagues there and their previous statements in relation to this petition. There are several areas and regions, particularly my region of West Scotland, we have several there on a similar basis, but I think we've got to leave it with the partnership, the health and social care partnerships to decide. The government clearly doesn't agree with the action in the petition, and obviously pursuing a policy, and therefore I would agree to close petition under Rule 15.7 on that basis, leaving it with the local situations to be resolved. And obviously there are several campaigns going on throughout Scotland which I know of and we're aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. David Torrance?
Thank you, Convener. I agree with you and my colleagues to close the petition, and I'm not going to add anything else to that.
Okay, thank you. And Tom Mason?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I mean, I agree with what has been said. It has always worried me in terms of the health generally. It's not clear to the population that what the general expectation is, and what people can expect in every area. Hence, there's always campaigns to change it, and the mechanisms by which this is done are not available. And the accountability of local health boards, well, they don't have democratic accountability. They're raising the goods stuck on the boards, quite often remote from the population. I mean, that whole general thing always has worried me, but it doesn't resolve this particular case. And we have actually no alternative here but to close this particular case.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tom. I think the sense of the committee is that we understand that local communities will campaign. There's a big issue, I think, about responsiveness of individual health boards, and I know that people are very actively engaged in the specific area that the petitioner has identified. So we wouldn't want to suggest that shouldn't happen, or that there is not the important job for health boards and others to reflect on the decisions that they're making. And I agree completely with Tom Mason's point that what the expectation for myself living in the city of Glasgow of proximity of a hospital is completely different from family I might have had in some of the islands who recognise that a lot of their care will be taken off on the mainland and so on. So the perception is different, but nevertheless, I think we have to separate off the rights and wrongs of the individual campaign at a local level from what this petition asks. And I think we'd agreed that it would not be sustainable. It would not necessarily even be good health policy simply to say, on the basis of the size of a town, you should automatically qualify for a hospital, because that's not the way in which population is spread. So I think there is an agreement that we would close the petition. We recognise the strong feelings that have motivated the petitioner, but we would also want to thank the petitioner for bringing this to our attention, and recognise that no doubt that this campaign will be ongoing, because people across the area who will be served by the new hospital will have very strong views on it. So unless I see any disagreement in the queue box, we'll be agreeing, in the chat box, sorry, we will be agreeing to close the petition on the basis that's been identified. I think that's agreed, and again we want to thank the petitioner for engaging with the Petitions Committee. If we now can move to the next new petition for consideration today, which is petition 1806 on improving survival from pancreatic cancer, lodged by Emily Waller on behalf of Pancreatic Cancer UK. Petition is calling on the Scottish Government to produce a national plan focusing on 3 areas to make pancreatic cancer a survivable disease: investing in strategic pancreatic cancer research to save lives, delivering faster and better treatment and care across Scotland, and a national campaign to raise public awareness of pancreatic cancer symptoms. Our papers explain that difficulties in diagnosing pancreatic cancer and its stage, size and precision mean that treatment might not be successful. In its written submission, the Scottish Government recognises the importance of early diagnosis, stating that it has invested significant resource into improving Scotland's pancreatic cancer services, outlining some of the actions it has taken, including investing in strategic pancreatic cancer research and updating referral guidelines to raise awareness of the potential signs and symptoms. I think this is, again, a very interesting petition. Recognise that the petitioner is petitioning on behalf of a charity which clearly has a great deal of expertise in this field. And from our papers, I think I certainly was troubled by the survival rates, which are clearly much poorer than many other cancers, and therefore there is a recognition of the importance of acting. My sense, again, from reading the papers, however, is that the Scottish Government is is recognising the challenge of this cancer and has been taking action on it. But I will call members. First of all, Maurice Corrie.
Thank you, Convener. This is a very interesting one, and one which I must say has come up in Parliament before on debates. it is very good to see that within the last year that there's been a big investment in the Beatson Institute in Glasgow to create the world-class pancreatic cancer centre for research. So I'm confident that the government is putting together with the health and the research side of that area to actually look at this in detail, and we have seen some wonderful research being done. So my position on this one at the moment is yes, we must deliver faster and better treatment, but it can only come from obviously the research that's being done. And we have the first pancreatic cancer research centre in the world now set up at the Beatson, as I say, in Glasgow. So I would at this stage move to close the petition under Rule 15.7 of standing orders at the moment, with the view that if the petitioner is not happy with progress, can come back within the year. But the government is addressing the investment in strategic pancreatic cancer research, and obviously that will lead to hopefully quicker diagnosis and quicker treatments. So I'm of that mind, Convener.
Okay, thank you very much. David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. I agree with Maurice. The government's set out a whole list of things that they're doing there to try and achieve the petitioners asked for. But what's more important for me is they're engaging directly with the petitioner, the government. So that is really important for their views to be heard. So I'm quite happy to close the petition under Rule 15.7.
Okay, thank you. Tom Mason.
Thank you, Convener. I mean, if only we could make some progress in Bureau here. But the only way to make that progress is to keep at it and keep close to the issues and maintain the resources going into research where we can, and cooperating effectively with on the international scene. It will be a world solution if we can get there, but we have to keep the pressure on. But in terms of this petitioner, I don't think we can do more, but therefore we'll need to close it.
Thank you. Gail Ross.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I agree with what has been said so far. The Scottish Government have updated the referral guidelines. They've got the research project, and they've also updated the cancer strategy as well. So thank the petitioner and close under 15.7 of standing orders. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there is a consensus then that we wish to close the petition, but that we recognise very strongly the importance of this area of work, but that we're content. I think the Scottish Government understands that as well. And like others, I think it was David who said, I'm particularly encouraged by the fact that the petitioner will be engaging directly with this issue through the Less Survivable Cancers Task Force. Clearly, the charity itself has an important role to play in that, and it's good that the Scottish Government has recognised that. So we are agreeing to close that petition. We want to thank the petitioner for taking the opportunity to highlight these important issues. And as already been said, of course, in a year's time, if you feel there hasn't been progress, this is something you can bring back to the Public Petitions Committee. But we want to thank you for your involvement with us. If we can now move on to the next new petition for consideration today, which is Petition 1811, Independent Sports Ombudsman, lodged by Ken White. The petition calls the Scottish Government to establish an independent sports ombudsman to provide a duty of care to all participants, coaches, officials, support staff, volunteers and clubs, ensuring all are treated fairly and without prejudice, and review and arbitrate in disputes with Scottish governing bodies, SGBs. We've received written submissions from the Scottish Government and the petitioner. The Scottish Government notes that all SGBs which receive public funding via Sport Scotland are required to have open and transparent policies and procedures in place. Sport Scotland contracts auditors to undertake external development audits of SGBs in which they invest. These examine governance, financial, risk management, planning and reporting, human resource management, policies, communication and ICT. The Scottish Government does not note any opinion on the need for an independent sports ombudsman in its submission. The petitioner agrees with the Scottish Government that everyone must be treated equally and issues should be able to be addressed. However, they note if an SGB refuses to discuss anything, then the Scottish Government must appoint an independent sports ombudsman. In terms of initial views, I think this is an important area. Sport has a lot of young people engaged, there are a lot of volunteers involved, We know there have been some controversies in the past. I mean, I note that cycling, at one point, there was been flagged up issues there. Also, very recently, gymnastics have had this issue, and these have been very much flagged up at a UK level. But we also know from our own work that, historically, issues around the way young footballers were treated has been something that's very current for us. So I'm not sure, the petitioner says there's an issue here. I don't know whether there is an issue or not, but I do know that we have a duty of care to young people who are engaged in sport and to make sure there's transparency. We also know that these governing bodies do absolutely fantastic work in supporting and sustaining their sports and particularly engaging with volunteers. So I don't have a view, I'm not in any way suggesting that there's a huge issue here that has to be investigated, but I think we do need to have some confidence that there is rigour around this area of work. I suppose I think we just maybe need to ask a few wee questions before we would dispose of the petition altogether. But I'm going to ask members in turn for their views, and we'll start with David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. Can I register interest here? I have met with the petitioner and club members about the decisions that their governing body have taken against individuals and against the club. Can I say the club has appealed to them on several occasions, and the responses, I would say, have been a fob off. Even when I intervened for the club, the response I got back was just absolutely ridiculous from the governing body. I actually think there's a real need here for somebody to arbitrate, because when a club members or an individual cannot get anywhere with a governing body and really raise concerns with it, and as I said before, are just being ignored by its hierarchy in that governing body, I think there's real issues with sport here and the clubs that make up these organisations. I would actually like to see members of the club, or Ken White and members of the club, come in and give evidence, but I would also like to see a government come in and say why there shouldn't be an independent sports ombudsman, put questions to the Cabinet Secretary or the Minister, because it's really raised my eyebrows trying to deal with the governing body on behalf of this club and its members, and the response back I have got. And it's just how they've been treated, I think, is not right. And that's all I'm going to say to Mark.
Okay, thanks for that, David. I should highlight, of course, that the role of the committee would not be to arbitrate in this particular case. We can only look at the general issues that may be extrapolated from that, but I appreciate that you flagged up your direct experience, but obviously we would want to look at whether there's a general need for this rather than trying to deal with perhaps the individual case that's prompted the petition in the first place. I'm going to call Tom Mason.
Yes, Convener. I mean, I do sense there is a frustration in terms of getting final resolutions of various problems in bodies of, and allowing, because there is no higher authority that the clubs can go to, these frustrations will continue. And some general ombudsman who can resolve these issues, where the governing bodies of the various sports categories cannot, I think could be a solution. So I think if we go in and get the views of government in terms of taking something forward in the future that can arbitrate on some of these issues, I think it will provide a good solution. But we won't be able to do that in the short term. But I think if we request the views and hope the government can take something forward, it will be a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Gail Ross.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I think that the petitioner puts forward a good argument for this, and obviously hearing what David Torrance has to say as well. I do think that we should be writing to the Scottish Government to ask for the specific views on whether it's needed. And also, if it's not needed, where do clubs such as the one that David is talking about go when they don't get a satisfactory response from the governing body? I definitely think that there's some kind of gap there, and I would be interested to hear the Scottish Government's views on that. Thank you.
Okay. Maurice Corrie.
Thank you, Convener. I agree with all the points made already by my committee colleagues. Obviously, our experience with youth football has obviously taught us a lot of lessons about issues on governance, and I certainly would agree that I think at this stage we need to write to the Scottish Government and get their views on it, and obviously where the concerns are, and in relation to the fact that some of the some sports don't have a governing body, so therefore there's a gap there, and that's something that needs to be done about that to allow the individuals to raise any issues, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed pretty quickly. So I would agree that we write to the Scottish Government at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Maurice. I think there is again a consensus here. We recognise there is an issue, a more general issue, rather than a specific issue that's been flagged up by David, and that we would want clarity from the Scottish Government on its views. Do they think we need an independent sports ombudsman? Again, which has been flagged up, where concerns about a Scottish Government body should be raised if there's no independent sports ombudsman. I think we're agreed on that, and if that's the case, we would take that action. Okay, if we can now move on to the next new petition for consideration today, which is petition 1813, reform the national curriculum to include all African Scottish history, lodged by Eunice Olumide, and petition 1814, compulsory education of Black, Asian and minority ethnic history in Scottish schools, lodged by Toba Amamis. Petition 1813 calls on the Scottish Government to reform the national curriculum to include Afro-Scottish history, including artefacts of African diaspora, cultural and economic contributions, the role of the British Empire and the benefits to Scotland from colonies of the Caribbean and Africa. Petition 1814 calls on the Scottish Government to embed Black, Asian and minority ethnic history into school curriculum. A joint SPICE briefing and a joint Scottish Government submission has been provided for these two petitions, and as such I suggest we consider them together. We have not received a submission from either of the petitioners, but have received a submission from Andrew Strachan. The Deputy First Minister and Cabinet Secretary for Education issued a public statement on 14th July setting out the Scottish Government's position on these issues. The Scottish Government submission expands on this. It advises it considers that the education framework already provides opportunities for young people to learn about all aspects of history, heritage and culture of Scotland, including the role that Scotland played in the slave trade, both as part of the broad general education and as part of courses at National 5, higher and advanced higher level. The submission states to support schools to make diverse choices about how they approach the curriculum, Education Scotland officials are in the process of working to exemplify how race equality can be addressed through whole school approaches. It also advises an external reference group, including BEMIS and the Coalition for Racial Equality and Rights, are informing the work, and a race equality and education resource for practitioners is nearly complete, due for launch in September. I think that there are obviously quite important issues here, and I think we would want to get an update on what progress has been, is my sense, given how much has been progressing in the last wee while. But can I call Tom Mason?
Thank you, Convener. I agree with you. There's a lot going on here, and which are in progress. And to make any decision that before we have an update, I think will be a mistake. Therefore, asking the government to give us the progress of the various groups, and so we can consolidate those thoughts and come to some conclusion at a later date.
Thank you very much, Tom. Gail Ross.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I mean, I think that the Scottish Government have done a lot of work in this area, but certainly as individual MSPs, I know that we've had quite a lot of correspondence on this. I certainly wrote to Mr Swinney myself on behalf of some constituents that got in touch with me. I think you're right. I think it is worthwhile asking the Scottish Government what progress has been made with stakeholders, and I'm interested in the external reference group with BEMIS and CREER and the education resource, which is due for launch this month. So maybe we could get a little bit of an update on that as well. But I think that certainly Tom Mason is correct. We do need to get some more information about where we are at this exact moment in time before we decide what we're going to do with this particular petition. So I would advocate that course of action. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maurice Corrie?
As I say, I agree with what's been said, and I think we just need to. There's so much moving in this particular subject at the moment, practically every 6 months. So I think we just need to write to the Scottish Government and request an update in the progress with the stakeholder discussions that they're having, and obviously out in the greater circle, because obviously these things are coming up now, both internationally and nationally, and we need to address them. Thank you.
Thank you. And David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. I agree with all committee members. We just need to write to the Scottish Government for an update to see where we are and how this is progressing. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're all recognising the importance of the issues that have been flagged up in this petition. So we are agreeing to write to the Scottish Government to get an update, to get some progress. But can we also agree as a committee that in future we'll take both these petitions together when we come to consider them again, given just how close they are in relation to the issues that have been flagged up? Is that agreed? Okay, we'll take that as agreement, and I'm going to suspend briefly before we move to the next agenda item. 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes, but we will flag back up to when we're ready to come back. So I'll suspend the meeting. Thank you, and bring the meeting back to order. And we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is consideration of continued petitions. The first continued petition for consideration today is petition 1766, legal aid for private criminal prosecutions for unwaged and/or learning disabled victims of abuse, lodged by Andrew Buchan. The petition calls on the Scottish Government to change the law to provide free legal aid to people who are unwaged and/or learning disabled victims of abuse who wish to bring a private criminal prosecution. The Scottish Government submission outlines recent action it has taken to review the way in which legal aid operates in Scotland. The submission also outlines a process for seeking a private prosecution. Members may wish to note that the Government's response concludes by stating that the system of public prosecution in Scotland works well and has no plans to change the way private prosecutions can be initiated. The petitioner's written submission outlines his own personal experience of trying to raise a private prosecution and is of the view that he should have access to legal aid to challenge, quote, classism and corruption. I think this is a very difficult area of work, always has been, around legal aid and access to justice. I'm not convinced, I suppose, that the main focus of the argument is around private prosecutions. I think we want to be confident that the public prosecution system is working fairly and that people have access to justice. But I'm going to call members. Can I call first of all Maurice Corrie?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, a very interesting petition here, and I understand the government's position in this and having no plans to adjust the current process by which the private prosecution system can be initiated. I think there's some questions here to be asked, and rather than close the petition, Convener, I would be of the mind to get some further information from appropriate bodies such as the Law Society of Scotland and others that would be deemed sensible by the committee.
Okay, thank you for that. David Torrance?
Thank you, Convener. I'm quite happy to close the petition under 15.7 of standing orders, because if the Scottish Government has no intentions of changing the law, the petition is not going to go anywhere. And so I'm quite happy to shut it down. Thank you.
Okay, I think we might have lost the convener, so we'll go to Tom Wilson, please. Tom, over to you.
Okay, right. Thank you. Wrong plan B here, obviously. It's a very difficult one. This clearly this petition has two parts. One is the private prosecution system, and the other one is legal aid generally. I mean, there are huge problems with the legal aid system in Scotland, and that applies right across the board. And we've been involved with as a justice of peace with legal aid problems, and also represent a number of cases, and they've been incredibly difficult trying to get them sorted. But as far as this petition goes, I don't think we can make much progress unless we go into the legal aid in a general basis. And I think that's a far bigger issue than this petition actually demands. So I think actually closing it is the only thing to do at this stage. And if a further petition wants to come in on legal aid itself, I think it would be much more appropriate in this case.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Certainly from the evidence that we've had, it all seems to hinge on the 1986 Act. So it's actually we've got no legislative powers to provide legal aid for representation at private prosecutions. I don't know if we want to go back to Maurice to ask if he's happy on that basis to go with the other two members and to close the petition on that basis.
Sorry, oh, sorry. Am I?
No,
convening him now?
Yes, thank you.
Right, thank you. Yes, I hear what the other members have said, and I take them on board very much that point. I take also the point what I said earlier on in the beginning about the position of the Scottish Government. I just have this hunch that maybe we could tease something out of the Law Society a little bit further. But I think, as you quite rightly point out, Deputy Convener, there is the Legislative Act in place in 1986, And I think at this stage, therefore, I think we should, on the basis of that, I would agree to close the petition.
Thank you, Maurice. I really appreciate that, you coming back in there. So we have agreed to close the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that the Scottish Government has no plans to adjust the current process by which private prosecutions can be initiated, and we would want to thank the petitioner, and obviously they can come back in a year's time if they feel that their issues haven't been addressed. The second continued petition for consideration today is Petition 1768, Children Hearing Proceedings Should Be Minuted and/or Recorded, lodged by James A. Mackey. The petition is calling for the Scottish Government to ensure that all proceedings in a children's hearing are minuted or recorded. We've received the Scottish Government's response, which contains further information on the Children's Hearing Improvement Partnership, CHIP, including why parents and children are not involved, as we requested. Now, the Scottish Government has explained the background to the recording process of decisions and also highlighted the low number of appeals. On the CHIP, it acknowledges that there is no direct representation of children and families, but they are involved in the group's work. The petitioner's response states that the Scottish Government response does not reflect the reality of experiences in the children's hearing system and highlights the glaring gaps in procedures that could be amended now. It does not agree with the Scottish Government that there is sufficient input by families and children in CHIP, saying that parents and families are being demonised and ignored. On appeals, he states that there are few appeals because the process is difficult, confusing, and there is little guidance or difficulty in finding support from a solicitor. I do think that from the evidence that we've been given, it's been explained to us quite clearly why children's hearings are not minuted. But I'll wait to hear other members' views on this, and I would like to go first to David Torrance, please.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. In the Scottish Government's response to the petition, and what the petition is calling for, states that it could undermine the ethos of the system, making exchanges more formal and possibly inhibiting young people when asked to give their views, and could reduce the current participation approach. And I think that's quite crucial in getting young people to take part in the hearings and give their views over. So I think if we minute it, you become very formal, and it could be very difficult for some young people to actually give their views over. And when you come to the appeal system, it's not on the minutes, it's actually on the decision made by the panel that the judge will be taking a decision on. So I'm quite happy to close the petition under 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that the Scottish Government has no plans to change the way that children's hearings are recorded. Thank you, Deputy Convener.
Thank you, David. Can I go next to Tom Mason, please?
Thank you. This is a very difficult area, and I appreciate fully the reason why the recording is not done at the moment, whatever. But there is this great issue of how you carry forward certainly adjourned cases forward from one meeting to the next meeting, and to know what has gone on before. And I guess it can be quite grueling to go through various issues, and the various decisions might change because of not knowing what has gone on before. And I would have thought that it could be possible to have a recording system which is not intrusive, but does record what's going on. I mean, in terms of someone sitting there taking minutes, but surely they must record the whole meeting, which is in the background, shouldn't impede what's going on. So I think we need to keep this open to explore a bit further what is going on here to get the best balance between the two, because it is incredibly frustrating when these cases are not perceived to be well understood and dealt with in terms of appeals and the like. Some families get absolutely desperate as a result of the situation being perceived to be unfair. So I think we need to investigate further and keep this open for the time being.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And Maurice Corey?
Deputy Convener, yeah, with what Tom Mason's just said. I think I have some concerns that I don't think we fully got to the root of this, and I'm absolutely keen that we should write to the Scottish Government to highlight the continued concern raised by the petitioner. Keep this open just now, because I've heard of cases where it has slipped through the net, and there probably hasn't been enough understanding on some cases, some difficult cases, don't get me wrong, and therefore I think there should be a better form of recording, particularly key points over and above the decisions taken, but that's a matter for the legal system, Scottish Government. So I would agree that we keep it open just now and write to the Scottish Government, as I've said. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. Can I come back to David just to ask his view on whether he would be agreeable with the other members of the committee to write to the Scottish Government to see if there might be a way to record, as Maurice said, key points if there's a contentious issue without it impinging on the child involved and the other people involved on their willingness to open up and be comfortable in the meeting. Would you be happy with that course of action, David?
Deputy Convener, for the sake of consensus, I will agree with all the committee members. Thank you.
That's very good of you, David. Thank you. So based on our discussion and the comments I've just made, we're agreeing to write to the Scottish Government to ask for that specific piece of information, if that's being considered at all, and we will move on to the next petition. Thank you, members. The next continued petition today is PE 1769, Higher Education in Scotland, lodged by Marie, apologies for getting your name wrong, Oldfield. The petition is calling for the Scottish Government to review the way higher education in Scotland is set up and delivered in Scotland, including how students' rights are enforced and whether there is scope to allocate more power to the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman. And I'd like to welcome Jackie Bailey, MSP, to our meeting for consideration of this petition. Now, since our last consideration of this petition in January this year, we have received written submissions from the Minister for Further Education, Higher Education and Science, Quality Assurance Agency Scotland and the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman. The committee has also received a submission from the petitioner, and these are summarised in our papers. Since the publication of our papers, the petitioner has provided a further submission highlighting that most people are not available to bring matters to court, and so there is no way to achieve a reasonable result on a complaint if the SPSO is not able to provide one. I would like to invite Jackie Bailey to speak to and inform the committee if she's there. Jackie.
Thank you very much, Deputy Convener, and thank you to the committee for allowing me to take up some of your time this morning. The petition is actually from my constituent, Marie Oldfield. She was engaged in a course of study, postgraduate study at Glasgow University, which she funded herself. And I should, of course, say she was a former teacher herself and a validator of university degree courses. So she does have a very rounded perspective of university education. I hope you will agree. So in that light, her experience at Glasgow University on her postgraduate course was not good. There were a number of lectures, tutorials, all abandoned as a result of industrial action at the time. And I'm not going to dwell on the specifics of her case because I appreciate the committee won't discuss individual cases, but I do want to focus briefly on her experience of the complaints process, because it does seem to me that the complaints process is not robust and there is little by way of external checks on that. So as the committee will know, the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman doesn't look at the substance of complaints, it looks at the process, and certainly it appears to rarely uphold higher education complaints. I do understand, though, that they have raised issues in the past about Glasgow University's complaints process. Then, of course, there is the enhancement-led institutional review, which is quite a mouthful, carried out by Quality Assurance Scotland, and that looks at academic standards, but it also looks at the student experience. Now, back in 2014, it identified that there were issues at Glasgow University in relation to postgraduate students. In 2019, some 5 years later, in a technical report, it actually established that those same issues remained, and so little had changed. So Ms Oldfield's experience is that while she was engaged in the complaints process, the university was sending her threatening letters and actually even refused her offer of mediation with a local law centre. So there appears to be little accountability, little external oversight, and that is the reality of her experience in universities, and they appear to be left to their own devices. So I understand that ultimately this might be a matter for the Scottish Funding Council. They may have a role, and I would therefore be most grateful if the committee would take that a little bit further. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much. Can I go to members for their comments and suggestions, please, starting with Tom Mason?
Thank you, Deputy Convener. Yes, I agree with Jackie Bailey. I mean, I was an academic for 27 years, and I understand how these things can come about. And I had a number of experiences which, effectively, university bullying went on, academics to get solutions. Most of which I resolved myself. I used to carry my resignation in my pocket, which I occasionally had to put on the desk in order to make a point. So I think seeking more information from the Funding Council and keeping this open and bringing more information in to pressure some sensible solution. I'm not for a complete process of dominating the process from outside. That would be constructive, but we have to progress from where we are to something better. And I think this could be the vehicle to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Maurice Corey?
Thank you, Deputy Convener. First of all, can I thank the petitioner for a very detailed and highly interesting submission, and also to Jackie Bailey for her sort of highlighting the various points of it. As I said, I don't know the petitioner, but she's certainly in my region as well. So, and also I'd like to thank Tom Mason for his comments from his experience, and that has highlighted various points. I'm very minded to keep this open. I think it's something there we need to resolve. I have heard instances of this before in my work, and I feel that we should write to the Scottish Funding Council, as Tom Mason said, seek their views, and also to write to the Minister of Further Education, because I don't think he's given enough evidence to the point with his submission as it stands at the moment, and see what comes out of that. So, yeah, Deputy Convener, I would like to keep this open on the basis of those 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. And David Torrance.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. Like my colleagues on the committee, I would like to keep the petition open, and we need to write to the Scottish Funding Council, and we definitely need to write to the Minister for Further Education to see what his response is to the points raised in the petition. Thank you, Deputy Convener.
Thank you, David. And thank you again to Jackie Bailey. Your evidence, I think, was extremely important in this particular petition. I do have a sense as well that we do need to follow this up. I want to thank the petitioner. I mean, the amount of information and the depth of information was substantial. And so certainly I think as a committee, we are agreeing to write to the Scottish Funding Council to seek its views, and also to write to the Minister for Further Education, Higher Education and Science. And we will get back to this at a later date. So once again to Jackie Bailey and the petitioner, thank you very much. The next continued petition for consideration today is PE 1773, Reform Rape Law, lodged by Sarah Takahashi. The petition is calling for the Scottish Government to update the Sexual Offences Scotland Act 2009 to include the offence of a man being raped by a woman. Since our last consideration of this petition in January of this year, the committee has received submissions from the Scottish Government, the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, the Law Society of Scotland and Police Scotland. These submissions are summarised in our meeting papers. The petitioner was invited to respond to these submissions, however, a response has not been received. I found the evidence, particularly from the Law Society, quite stark, actually. And the statement that they made, that it would seem that the petition would seem to seek a removal of the distinctive elements of the actual crime of rape being a specific crime of penetration. And certainly all of the submissions stated that the conduct highlighted in this particular petition would be a criminal offence under Section 3 or 4 of the 2009 Act, but certainly the petitioner has asked for that to be updated. Views from the other members of the committee? I'll start with Maurice Corrie, please.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Convener. As I say, it's a complicated one, but certainly I think there is enough legal powers, legal laws, should we say, in place in Scotland at the moment. And I think really on that basis, I'm of the mind to recommend we close the petition under Rule 15.7 standing orders on the basis that obviously the written submissions have explained why rape is confined to crimes of penal penetration, and therefore there's enough evidence in enough information in the evidence that's put before us to allow us now, I think, to recommend that we close the petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. David Torrance.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. I agree with Maurice. I think we should close the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders, because the Law Society of Scotland doesn't agree with what's called for in the petition, and it says there's adequate there in the laws just now to protect everybody. So I'm happy to close the petition, Deputy Convener.
Thank you, David. And Tom Mason.
Yes, I agree with my colleagues. There's been enough information and to make sure that we can't have any change to the effects of this, and therefore closing it under 15.7 is appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I want to obviously thank the petitioner. I know that this is another one that we're dealing with. It's an extremely emotive issue, and when emotion runs up against legislation, it's very, very difficult. I think that the committee are agreed, though, to close the petition under 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that all of the written submissions that we've received explained why rape is confined to crimes of penile penetration, that the conduct highlighted in the petition can currently be punishable to the same degree as rape, and that the Law Society of Scotland states that it does not consider that there is a failure to prosecute offending sexual behaviour affecting male complainers under the existing legislation. Thank you, members. And the final continued petition for consideration today is PE 1774, formally record vaping-related illness and death, lodged by Craig Edward. The petition is calling for the Scottish Government to collect data on vaping-related illnesses and vaping during pregnancy to ensure the best health interventions are provided to all. Since our last consideration of this petition, we have received submissions from the Scottish and UK governments. Although requested, we have not received a submission from the petitioner. The UK Government submission advises the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency launched the Yellow Card reporting for nicotine-containing e-cigarettes in 2016. The scheme collects reports of suspected adverse reactions associated with e-cigarettes. Scottish Government submission advises the National Scottish Clinical Coding Review Group of National Services Scotland has recently approved the use of the ICD-10 emergency code for coding vaping-related disorder for hospital admissions across NHS Scotland. I would say that it has been addressed in the submissions and the systems that both the Scottish Government and the UK Government currently have active, but I'll go to committee members as usual to hear your views. I'll start with Maurice Corrie, please.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. Obviously, this has been addressed at the UK level as well as obviously at Scottish Government level, and I of the mind, really, that we should close this petition under 15.7, the standing orders, on the basis of the data that's been given of vapor-related illnesses and vaping during pregnancy, which is collected both by the Scottish and UK government level, governments at that level, through the Yellow Card scheme and the Scottish clinical coding. So there is a grasp of this, and I note in the petitioner's comment about the report in the Daily Record on the 29th of September 2019 that children are now being targeted and vaping oils are being marketed at children and sold online, auction, eBay website without any age checks. That does concern me, and I would hope that that would be picked up by both governments and in relation to the various checks and balances they put in place. So it may be sensible at this stage to close a petition, but maybe write to the Scottish Government to say, in relation to that point that I've raised, that what is their reaction to that, and what can they do to mitigate and negate that happening to our young people. Thank you.
Okay, Maurice, thanks for that. David Torrance.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. And seeing as the data has already been collected through the Yellow Card scheme and the Scottish clinical coding, I'm quite happy to support my colleague Maurice and close the petition under Rules 15.7 of Standing Orders.
Okay, thank you, David. And Tom Mason.
I agree with my colleagues. Both governments have been, have got it not under total control, but have attention on it. I think a letter off to the governments might be a good idea to remind them that the child issue is still in currency and not to be forgotten. But they're all on the right line at the moment. So closing under 15.7 with a letter thrown off to the governments will be an appropriate action, I think.
Thank you, Tom. So we are thanking the petitioner, but we are agreeing as a committee to close the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that data on vaping-related illnesses and vaping during pregnancy is collected at both Scottish and UK level through the Yellow Card scheme and Scottish clinical coding, but to write a letter to the relevant minister about the advertising and promotion of these particular products. Does anyone disagree with that? Good. And that completes our meeting today. I would like to thank all the petitioners and Rory for coming in and giving us evidence right at the start of the meeting. Thank all the members for your important contributions, and thank the convener who is somewhere watching us, and hopefully she can join us again next week. I'll close this meeting. Thank you.